Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada will meet its NATO defence spending targets in less than a year. A recent NATO report estimates Canada spent 1.45% of its GDP on defence in 2024. Well, Carney is now vowing to increase that to the 2% target by next March. To get there, Carney says Canada will make $9.3 billion in additional defence spending this year. That includes $2.6 billion on recruitment and retention of personnel, $2.1 billion on strengthening relationships with the defence industry and preparing for a future industrial strategy, and $2 billion to diversify defence partnerships with countries that are not the U.S.
More broadly, we're too reliant on the United States. We will ensure that every dollar is invested wisely, including by prioritizing made-in-Canada manufacturing and supply chains. We should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America.
Pete Hoekstra is the United States Ambassador to Canada, and he joins me now in the studio. Ambassador, it's good to meet you. Thanks for coming in today, sir.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
I'd like to start with your reaction to the announcement the Prime Minister made today that Canada is going to accelerate its defence spending to hit the 2% NATO target by the end of this fiscal year. This has been a bone of contention between Canada and the U.S. for a while. What's your reaction to this news?
Well, it's not only been a bone of contention between the United States and Canada. I think it's probably been a bone of contention between Canada and the other 31 partners of NATO. I think, speaking for the United States, yes, thank you. This makes the alliance stronger, allows us to put in place the things that we need to have in place to, keep the world a safer place. So no, we're thankful that the new government has made that commitment.
A lot of it seems to be, pay raises and internal things designed with retention of military personnel and some investment in capital, but it's not a big surge in capability in what Canada can bring to the alliance right now. What do you make of that?
Well, you start with the basics. You put the building blocks in place. You need the manpower. You need the people there. Then you start building capabilities and perhaps make some capital investments and those kinds of things. If you don't have the people in place, you can buy all the capital investments you want. You can buy all the F-35s that you want, but if you don't have the people to fly them, to maintain them, and those kinds of things, doesn't make a lot of difference.
Okay, there is a promise and a signal of big capital spending down the road, certainly from the Prime Minister, but also a signal that they want to move some of that capital away from your country, with Mark Carney saying today that Canada should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America. They want to manufacture more in Canada. They're looking at deeper integration with Europe on this. I mean, what do you make of this deliberate moving away from the United States on that?
Well, we'll see if it's deliberate or not. America will compete for every defense dollar that Canada's spending. We expect that we will bring you the best value, the best product, and when the Canadian government and procurement office looks at it and says, that's a pretty good deal from America. I think that's kind of like what we did with the F-35s. We put together American industry along with other folks, put together a deal that a lot of countries couldn't refuse. Why? A modest investment at the beginning of the program and billions of dollars worth of contracts as the program continues to mature and as we build aircraft and sell them to countries around the world.
But it sounds like the Prime Minister is intent on reducing the integration or slowing the integration, becoming more self-reliant domestically and more engaged with Europe and away from the United States.
Like I said, we'll compete for every dollar. We build fantastic products. We're a tough competitor. A lot of our stuff is interchangeable and interoperable with our friends to the north. There's a cost to doing that, but that's a decision the Prime Minister and the Canadian government will make. All I can say is that we want to do business with Canada. We will compete for that business, and ultimately Canada will make the decision as to what products they will buy.
Okay, I want to play a clip if I can, Ambassador. This is something that the Prime Minister said today, sort of about U.S. global dominance. In his view, the implication from it is that it could be a thing of the past, or at least that's how he's viewing it and adjusting to a post-U.S. dominant world. Just have a listen to this.
With the fall of the Berlin Wall, the United States became the global hegemon. Its gravitational pull on Canada, always strong, became virtually irresistible. But now, the United States is beginning to monetize its hegemony, charging for access to its markets and reducing its relative contribution to our collective security.
I wonder what your reaction is to that.
It's kind of like reducing its relative contribution to our United security. Yeah, absolutely. All right. For years, I mean, when I was in the Netherlands, the ambassador there, 1918 to 21, I think there were 8 or 9 NATO countries that were meeting a commitment of paying 2%. You bet. We demand, the president demanded, encouraged other countries to meet their NATO commitment, saying, the commitment is there to keep Europe safe. And a lot of countries didn't commit. And so, yeah, we were asking our allies to step up because the president has to go home to, American voters. And it's a pretty hard question when, someone asks, Mr. President, America's paying significantly more than 2% for NATO. But yet we have 20-some countries who aren't even close to 2%. Please justify and explain that to us. And it's kind of like, that's hard to explain. Why is America paying for the security of those 24, 23 countries that aren't paying for NATO? Doesn't make any sense. And the president says, no, this is in 2014. NATO agreed. Every country said we're going to get to 2%. The president was only asking, and we're currently only asking people to do, countries to do what they committed that they were going to do. And if they step up, does that mean our share goes down? Yes, but we're still investing significantly in defense, if I may. It just kind of reminds me when I got to the Netherlands, it was the president was, as we were talking and discussing this, right. Okay, what did the Europeans say? Oh, the U.S. wants to quit NATO. Trying to change the narrative about them not spending their 2%, saying, oh, the U.S. is going to leave. No, the intent was never to leave. The intent was to get our European allies to contribute. And if they weren't going to contribute, then getting an answer to the question, what do you all know about NATO that leads you to make the decision, we're not going to contribute to it. We'll just let America pick up the tab.
I take your point on the NATO target, right? If the countries are going to agree to something like that, countries should aspire to live up to it, right? And I do take your point on that. But the bit in that clip before the collective security, the United States is beginning to monetize its hegemony, charging for access to its markets. I think that's how a lot of Canadians feel about what's happening right now with the trade disputes going on between our two countries, right? I mean, what do you make of that point that it is seen as less of a partnership and more of the economic dominance being used to try to squeeze a country like Canada?
No, we're not squeezing. I mean, what the president is asking for and has made very clear, we're looking for equity and fairness in these trade agreements across and around the world. Fair agreements that enable enable Americans to compete successfully. Yes, we want to bring prosperity and grow prosperity for the American people. We want more security and safety for the American people. Those are the priorities that the president has put in place, and the strategies that you're now seeing are put in place to allow that to happen.
How is, though, the disruption of the auto pact, the free trade agreement that this president negotiated and signed, with former Prime Minister Trudeau's government, how is upending all of that seeking fairness when Canada has been living by the rules of the agreement they signed with this president?
We're living by the rules, and the president has the latitude under U.S. law to put in place investigations for industries that we deem essential for our national security. That's what he's doing with steel, aluminum, and that's what he's doing with autos. We'll get past this. We will have an agreement with the Canadians. That the timing and the content of when that agreement will be reached. That's between the president and your prime minister.
Well, I mean, a week from now, they're going to be in Kananaskis for the G7. There was some notional ambition to try to have maybe at least the sectoral tariffs resolved by then. What's your sense? Is that a possibility in the 7 days we have left before they gather?
There's a lot of possibilities. I know that there's a lot of discussions and a lot of talks going on. But again, when there's an agreement and an announcement is ready, it'll be the president and his team, and it'll be the prime minister and his team that will make that announcement. It won't be the ambassador from the United States to Canada who will make the announcement that, hey, there's an agreement. That will not be me.
Well, if you wanted to break that news, we'd be happy to have you doing it here on the show. But what is your sense? Like, I know we learned from you in your interview with the Globe and Mail, I believe, about the sort of the direct contact between Mr. Carney and Mr. Trump happening at some frequency. Is it moving in the right direction, do you think, or how would you characterize the tone and tenor of things right now?
Well, I mean, I think the tone and tenor is, again, observing from the outside, not being in those meetings. The announcement today by the Prime Minister that Canada is moving to 2% is a clear indication that things are moving in the right direction. The decision by the Prime Minister in Alberta, not a huge decision in the scope of the total economic framework, but saying, hey, we're going to put American alcohol back on our shelves. Our citizens, they will make the decision as to whether they're going to buy American alcohol or not. Those are two things that I think are indicating that some are seeing real progress or anticipating real progress in the discussions between the U.S. and Canada.
But I just wonder where you think the relations are because of all of this. Like, there's at least 700 people in the steel sector that have lost their jobs because of the tariffs, and the industry here warns thousands more. I mean, Algoma Steel sends more than 50% of its product into the United States, and it's now sort of been hit with a tariff of 50% because of a national security threat. And I'm not sure how the people in industry of Sault Ste. Marie constitute a national security threat to the United States.
The security threat is we need to have the ability to produce certain products and have access to those products inside the United States and those types of things. That's what the president promised us. You talk about the 700 people, and we feel for that. Anybody going through either a temporary or potentially a permanent layoff, of course, there's a tension that you feel. But I think many of your citizens have probably driven through parts of the Midwest that they call the Rust Belt. Okay, the Rust Belt, which is, not only individual factories, but communities devastated because Americans lost their job. So the president is committed to bringing prosperity back to those types of communities and those families who many people in the U.S. believe were left behind.
But what was Canada's role in that? This is what I try to understand, because you grew up in Michigan, right? The auto agreements have inflicted prosperity on Michigan, on Windsor, on southwestern Ontario, and now thousands of jobs have been lost in those sectors because of this disruption, right? Like, this is not making anyone better off, at least at this stage of it.
At this stage, I think that's the key thing, and it's the word that you use, disruption. Absolutely, it is disruption. This is why I believe that both governments and both teams are working towards getting to an agreement because I believe the future for both countries can be stronger and better once we get past this disruption.
But if you listen to the president, Ambassador, it sounds like for him to be satisfied, Canada must lose in this relationship. The auto jobs must move to the United States. It's a zero-sum game here where he says, we don't need this from Canada, we don't need that from Canada, we don't think you should be making cars. It sounds like, almost like a hostile takeover of a core sustaining sector for our biggest province.
No, I don't think that, I wouldn't agree with that analysis. I think that there is clearly a win-win possibility for us on a number of different issues, whether it is on defense, working together, we will be stronger in keeping our country safe and secure. The Golden Dome, whether it is on energy, whether it is on critical minerals. Canada, I think everybody recognizes, has a lot to offer. And that this partnership, like I said before, this partnership can be stronger, and that when America is stronger and we prosper, my guess is that Canada will be stronger and they will prosper. When America is safer and more secure, I think you'll see the same kind of benefits in Canada. We're united by a 4,800-mile border. We share a lot of other things. We've got great relationships. No, I think at the end of this day, it's not a zero-sum game. I think that a strong North America, united on a lot of these issues, we'll see significant more prosperity than where we are today.
Well, I guess the phrase win-win is what I look at. You want Canada to join continental defense with Golden Dome, buy military, get to the NATO 2%. Access to the critical minerals would obviously benefit, the people who produce those minerals in Canada. But it sounds like you want to have access to natural resources and have us be a customer, but the manufacturing component you want moved south of our border to the United States. This is what I take from the president. So how am I misunderstanding that? Because when I was in the Oval Office, when he met with Prime Minister Carney, the tone was very good. The mood was very good. But the words were still very aggressive in terms of him wanting to expropriate some of our economic success.
And I've heard fairly aggressive terms from Canadians coming back at the U.S. saying we're going to develop other customers, we're going to diversify, we're not going to buy as much.
By necessity, isn't it? Because we're living up to a trade agreement this president signed, and now here we are seeking something else, and there's real doubts about whether that would even be lived up to for the course of whatever it is.
American, we will live up. I mean, for the 50 years or 75 years of NATO, all right, there's been one country that has consistently been supporting NATO. That happens to be the United States of America. We are a reliable ally, a trusted ally, and we're okay. But let's wait and see what an agreement looks like. Okay, there's a lot of rhetoric potentially on both sides, but let's see exactly when there's an agreement. I'll come back and we'll talk to you about it again. Okay,
no, look,
we will both be saying, "Oh man, I maybe didn't anticipate this. This actually could be pretty good for both countries."
Well, do you understand?
Because I expect what Carney is doing, and when I'm listening to Carney, okay, what I expect, I see him negotiating for the best interest of Canada.
Sure.
And when he presents a deal, to the Canadian people and to Parliament, all right, he's got to be able to make a credible case that this is good for Canada. Which is the same thing that our president has to do when he comes back to Congress and he comes back to the American people. This is a good deal for America, and this is how it's going to bring us more prosperity. Tells me that, at the end of the day, this has to be a win-win.
But you can understand the skepticism, can't you, Ambassador, on this side of the border? Because, the 51st state stuff, and I know you said that was gone away, but then the president put it out on social media. If you join, you get Golden Dome for free.
Let's get it clarified. I said it was away unless the president or Carney decided to bring it up. And coincidentally, I think you could make a credible case that as the president brought it up, maybe the Canadians were bringing it up, and maybe the media was bringing it up at the same time. It wasn't just the president of the United States with his tweet. It was 36 hours of nonstop media coverage and Canadians talking about, this is proving our sovereignty. And it's kind of like you're thumping the president in the chest for 36 hours, and you shouldn't be.
But every
like
time
I said,
he does this, it moves markets, it moves money, like it costs jobs. I mean, these sectors are either sitting on money or downsizing their capacity because of they're afraid.
We're going through a transition. Okay, $2 trillion deficits on an annual basis. Were not sustainable for the United States of America. The president is acting in the interest of the American people by addressing our fiscal house and putting that in order. Millions of people coming across our border, undocumented, untracked, not even knowing it was not sustainable. And so, yes, the president is tackling that issue. Are any of these, as your prime minister has called it, are any of these transformational issues easy to deal with? No, they are difficult. But once we get through this transition period, the expectation is, and the expectation, you've got some issues here in Canada that the Prime Minister wants to address that are going to be tough to deal with. But the hope and the expectation is that when we're done transforming, much of our sector, that the Canadians are done transforming much of their sector, you will have two countries in the G7 that are in a race and in a competition as to which one will have the highest growth rate. And I couldn't think of a better competition to have in 2025 at the end of the year in 2026 than the U.S. and the Canada competing. Wait a minute, I've got the fastest growing economy. No, you do. Let's have that debate.
Let's hope it gets there, because the unemployment data is going in the wrong direction and the growth is going in the wrong direction in this country. And I think we're going to see the economic scars on both sides of the border if this isn't resolved relatively soon. But your scenario at the end of the year does sound like a better one. Look, Ambassador, I've gone way over time. It was good to meet you. Thanks for coming in. It's U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra. Thank you, sir.
Hey, great. Thank you.
Brad, I think a lot of people would like to be in that race, but that seems a long way from where things are at this moment, a week out from the G7.
Yeah, I heard that argument, and I just don't see it, because when you take a look at what it is that the tariffs are attempting to do, Trump is trying to onshore a bunch of jobs, and it's just not that simple. And a lot of the jobs that he's trying to bring back, I just can't see them adding to that growth and that value that the ambassador was talking about. What I was struck by today, and I think it's very interesting, the language that Carney was using. Like, that was some of the most anti-American rhetoric, and I say that favorably, that we've heard from a prime minister. It was elegant, it was subtle, but it was strong. The notion of monetizing their participation in world security, the notion that we are going to buy less of why does what is it, 3/4 of our defense spending go to the Americans? Like all of that, I think those were all very fascinating signals that he was sending in time for the G7. On the notion, on the notion. It won't be a, quote, a short period of time before the American economy goes through its transition. It's shorter than that. It's the midterm elections.
Right.
If Trump's, like right now, things are not very good in the United States. I'm not talking about Los Angeles. I'm not talking about ICE. I'm talking about the American economy is doing very poorly compared to many G7 economies around the world. It won't be whether or not more autos are being assembled in the United States. It won't be whether or not the steel industry, which is doing, relatively okay, but actually, they contract when the tariffs on steel go up. Just a handful of companies do very, very well under his tariffs. It's not like this is a panacea for job creation, but ultimately, it'll be the midterm elections, and if Trump loses control of one of the two houses, then you can start to see probably changes in it. It won't be once this fantasy transition is complete, because I just don't see it happening at all, let alone in the near term.
Rob, what did you make of the sort of the anti-American rhetoric, as Brad describes it, like monetizing hegemony? It's kind of an Oxford burn, but I get what he's saying there, right? In that you're squeezing everybody. Like, it's a little bit of a pressure play.
When I contrast that to what Ambassador Hoekstra said to you, which was in essence an endorsement of Mr. Carney's economic plans, he's saying like Canada's going to do very well under this guy based on what we've seen. It's also, I think, a broad hint that the discussions they're involved in now are probably going well, if he's thinking that that's going to be the result of it. I was thinking it's going to be difficult for Prime Minister Carney to maybe walk some of that back if there is a deal, because he campaigned in effect, on the danger, the peril that President Trump represents. And if he's making a substantial, deep, broad deal with the peril to Canada's sovereignty, it may take some political finessing. It'll be interesting to see how he does it. The truth is that just like the Europeans, for now, we cannot protect ourselves without the United States. We cannot have a prosperous economy without the United States. Yes, he's going to restructure our economy, but until that happens, our trade deficit just tripled. So we probably have to do that. So I'm sure he doesn't take my advice, and he shouldn't take my advice. But I think that I would pull some of those punches if you're going in a direction where you're going to make a deal, a substantial deal with the President of the United States.
But he's got to build internal support for this shift and for this big spending, right? Like you need to bring people, if you're going to add this much to the debt and the deficit, because these are very expensive problems, you have to make the case for it. And this is how you make the case to Canada. You know what I mean? Like I take your point. You're going to upset the Oval Office person, But if you go softer than that, can you bring the Canadians along on this plan?
You're going to have to, and you're going to want to do it, I think, before the teeth of the tariffs really begin to sink into the backs of Canadian working people. That's just beginning now.
Well, Q3 is sort of the start July, August, September.
That's beginning now, and I think that will pose more of a political problem for any prime minister than a deal with Donald Trump might.
But, Lisa, when you listen to the optimism of who's number one in the G7, is it me, is it you, this sort of thing from the ambassador, and look, I hope he's right. But, I struggle to see the win-win if we're going to take your auto jobs. We need total national security on steel and aluminum. The mayor of Sault Ste. Marie was on the show last week, Matthew Shoemaker, saying we're going to be a post-industrial town, just like the Rust Belt, if we don't get this lifted off Algoma, right? There's no win in that. That's only loss. And I'm not sure what the win is based on what we hear from the White House right now.
Well, it certainly is a timing issue. So perhaps the win, if you can think about this from an optimistic point of view, is that we have a burning platform on which Canadians need to make a decision on what their future economy is. And if we're getting strong signals from the United States that they're going to take the auto sector, well, we better figure out what it's going to be that's going to replace it. And I think that's kind of what you're hearing coming from all the parties right now, which is we talk about diversification of our economy, but basically it's, okay, where do we need to lean in order to get this up and running so that we can have something to substitute for the economies and the sectors that are under attack for stealing from Canada by the United States. The issue is timing, meaning that the jobs that can leak to the United States are going to go a lot quicker than the jobs in the economy that can be built in Canada. So it really is up to the government to try to short circuit and do as much as quickly as possible. And that's why you're seeing bills like the one that was introduced last week in terms of timeframes and regulatory measures and getting people building things right away. They see what's coming down the pipe.
So, Lisa, your thoughts on the rhetoric that Rob pointed out. I know Brad likes it. I don't think there's a lot of people of Brad's political persuasion working in the Trump White House. I'm just going to go out on a limb there.
Careful, David.
What's your sense on how, the way the anti-American rhetoric, as Brad described it, will be seen in the United States today?
Well, it's not as bad as Elon Musk.
Not yet. Okay.
So I say that facetiously, but what I'm saying is that I'm sure that there's an understanding of what level of a relationship that there is between the Prime Minister and the President. The Prime Minister wouldn't do something so foolish as to poison the well prior to the President coming to Canada or causing him to want to cancel his trip to Canada. That would be a massive loss of face for the Canadian government. So he probably had a pretty good idea of how far he could push the envelope, or at least I hope he did. But, you never know what kind of tweet or X truth you're going to get tonight at 2 a.m. So let's set our agendas and see what happens.
Well, let's hope he's paying more attention to Gavin Newsom than he is to Mark Carney today. Vandana, though, your thoughts on this? Whether Donald Trump sees it in real time, surely someone will run it up the chain to him that this is what was said, even in the news of hitting the target that Trump has wanted the NATO countries to hit. Is the Prime Minister running a risk here with this kind of rhetorical approach?
I don't think the Prime Minister would have done that if he felt it would be a risk. I think, if they're negotiating with each other and talking on a regular basis, I think they have a sense of each other. I'm sure Trump understands political posturing, like he does that with the 51st states and all those other things that he's been saying. So our guy's going to say whatever he needs to say, but also that is important for buy-in exactly to what Lisa's talking about. Buy-in to Canadians as to what we need to do. My understanding, when deficits are just deficits. People feel it one way. If deficits are tied to something, protecting Canada's sovereignty, I find that people can understand that as long as it's geared towards something they can understand and is tangible for them. And also could create industries for them that benefits everybody. So I don't think there's a risk here. I think, the Prime Minister will always make a calculated risk, but he also understands what he has to do. Like, listen, when I saw the announcement, the backdrop of, Canadian Armed Forces, it looked like a wartime announcement. And, I think that's the signal he's trying to give to Canadians. But I also think Trump will actually respect that more than anything else.
Yeah, and Brad, he went to Fort York, which was, one of the places in the War of 1812 that played a pivotal role in standing up against the Americans, not to put too fine a point on it. But, just Brad, your thoughts, is there a downside to this, do you think, potentially? With, a week before President Trump comes here with this hope. I don't think it was like, this is our deadline to get a deal, but, I think the Canadians were kind of hoping they might be able to have something done by next week. What are your thoughts on the risk?
Well, if it is a risk, then it's a calculated one, and it's one worth taking because it does buy the domestic buy-in. And it, like, if you read the speech or listen to the speech again, what I took away is the historical foundations that he's talking about, right? So everything, it wasn't about the NATO accountants; it was about defending Canadians. The notion that there's some kind of threat here, and I think that Canadians, obviously for quite a few generations, have not felt truly, unlike other parts of the world, that we're under threat. Also very interesting about next week. So yes, you've got the calculated risks with the rhetoric today on how we're pulling away from American economy reliance because they've basically stepped out of their traditional role, and we can't take comfort in that anymore. So I think that's a cohesive structure there. But now also look at the guest list. So it's not just the G7. Carney's invited, we've got Saudi Arabia coming, we've got Modi from India coming, we've got Albanese from Australia coming. It's like, we've got a number of actors. What does all that do? I mean, there's a lot there, probably a whole segment worth of conversation there, but the notion that with all of these other actors, on all these other pieces in the chessboard, Trump is going to be very important next week. But when all of these other actors are also here, it's diminished. If they weren't, if it was just the G7 proper, Trump would play a much larger role. But I think all of these other actors are going to kind of water down the importance of that and give lots of different things to Trump to be able to comment on, whether it's China, whether it's Ukraine, a whole bunch of things, not just Canada. This is not about us. It's about Canada on the world stage as much as it is just because it happens to be taking place in Alberta.